Penuel the Black Pen. I get criticized a lot by black people in South Africa online, whether it's in interviews that I conduct or where I'm a guest, whether it's certain tweets that I post or certain vlogs like this, videos that I make sharing my views. I do a lot of praising of the Afrikaner community and how they managed to come to Southern Africa as Europeans. Some could argue European rejects, organized themselves, created this mixed race, colored sort of European nation of French, Dutch, German, Huguenot origin to create Afrikaners, and how they went from being farmers to voortrekkers to using the Broederbond to investing in the National Party to running South Africa and then uplifting themselves to through some form of Afrikaner economic empowerment. I praise them and what they've built to a point where I'd join AfriForum as a civil organization. I'd admire the work they do in communities. I'd admire their collaboration with Solidarity, a trade union, in building a skills institution, etc. And people would say, stop sucking up to Afrikaans people, they hate you. They were the people behind apartheid. These organizations don't care about you at all. I would get bashed a lot, my admiration of the Jewish community. The Jewish people, very famously, sadly known for what happened in Germany under the Nazi regime of Adolf Hitler, where millions of Jews were gassed and killed and persecuted to a point where they were displaced even in Europe. And the British Empire would then advise them to go and settle in a piece of land which eventually became known as Israel. Today, Israel, with its war with Palestine, especially at the Gaza Strip, is deemed very polarizing, very controversial, especially with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Many people would say very negative things about the Jewish community in terms of how they run modern money and modern banking, linking their roots all the way to the Rothschild family, which had a banking empire across Europe, influenced the Central Bank of London all the way to the Federal Reserve and most central banks around the world. Jewish people are accused of going into countries, buying up property, taking over banking, issuing loans at high interest, and in effect, impoverishing the people that live in those spaces. The Jewish community would obviously, try to fight back and have a term called anti-Semitism of people that speak ill of the Jewish community and have a slogan of never again. Never again will we be oppressed and persecuted as we were under Nazi Germany rule. They infiltrate media, they infiltrate Hollywood, Silicon Valley, tech, etc. They are brilliant business people, very heavily invested in education, specifically law, specifically accounting and finance. But a very polarizing community that I would admire very much. I've got friends from the Afrikaner community that I'm very fond of, that I admire very much. I've got friends from the Jewish community that I admire, that I'm very fond of. I could also add the Muslim community as well, which for many people is linked to India, people in the Middle East, following the teachings of Prophet Muhammad and their interpretation of God in the Arabic, known as Allah. I would speak about them and how organized, etc. they are and how I admire them economically in terms of family and spirituality in South Africa. And many people say, but where are the black examples? Where are the black examples? There's a conspiracy theory that Nelson Mandela, the ANC, and some of the struggle movements, liberation parties, were used as a vehicle to break up the Bantustans in South Africa and integrate South Africa into one country. Hendrik French Verwoerd, who is seen as the father of apartheid and hated by a lot of black people, coloreds, Indians, as being racist, creating systems of oppression, subjugation, and economic exclusion for non-white people, would speak about apartheid as a system of good neighborliness. The Bantustans become a very interesting conversation in modern times because now we do a deep dive. Were they really that bad? Some of the leaders of Bantustan, such as places like Bophuthatswana with Lucas Mangope, would go and build their own tertiary institutions, would build their own banks, would build economic enterprise and would uplift and educate their people. Parts of the Eastern Cape, the Transkei, the Ciskei would have great leaders there, Omatanzima and others, even General Bantu Olomisa, who's still the leader of the UDM now. Again, building great educational institutions, educating their people, building economy. Though not necessarily a Bantustan, but places like KwaZulu. You've got Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi, who would be an advisor to the King uZwelithini, and again, there would be building of banks, building of tertiary institutions and other schools, and some type of economic development. Venda as a space as well. Did some entrepreneurs see difficulties in running business across Southern Africa because they needed to work with the leaders of the various Bantustans? Your Saul Kerzner setting up Sun City in Bophuthatswana, your Saul Kerzner bribing leaders in the Transkei to try and set up gambling spaces, casinos, hotels and resorts there. And they said, if we were to remove these Bantustan limitations, we'd be able to do business across Southern Africa, speaking through one channel, being one government. Again, I have to highlight, these are conspiracy theories. That when the barriers around the Bantustans were removed, the TBVC states, they weren't done for good reasons of integration, but they were done to dismantle the economic growth and prosperity of certain smaller groups in Southern Africa that looked like they were going somewhere and they were uplifting themselves. Similar to, let's say, the Afrikaners and the Broederbond, similar to the Jewish community, similar to the Indian Muslim community here. Were some of the Xhosa people in the Transkei, in the Ciskei, making headway economically in terms of education? Were the people of Bophuthatswana, Venda, KwaZulu making progress? And someone said, we don't like what's going on here. Where part of it becomes the assassination of Hendrik Verwoerd. Where there are theories that there are documents that are locked and archived that people can't read, that Hendrik Verwoerd was planning to read on how to assist the Bantustans, the TBVC states, to be able to build economic models for themselves, to uplift themselves. What some of the Afrikaner people in South Africa are calling for today, federalism. Why can't we run our own cultural groups in our own spaces? Yes, the polarizing and controversial Cape independence. Yes, the controversial and polarizing Orania town in the Northern Cape that I've had the pleasure and the privilege of visiting and being hosted and given a tour. Why can't Zulu people organize themselves under Ingonyama Trust and build a great economy? Why can't the Xhosa-speaking peoples in their different groupings do the same in the Eastern Cape? Why can't the people of Limpopo, whether it's the Bapedi or the Vavenda or the Xitsonga people, why can't the Tswana people do the same? I mean, Botswana is a great economy with their diamond reserves. Why not? Why not the Sotho people, not just in Lesotho, but in the Free States as well, the Ndebele people, in Mpumalanga, the Ndebele people of Zimbabwe, organize and uplift themselves as cultural groups without being forced to integrate. And when you look at their integration, you see who the biggest beneficiaries are. It's oligarchs, it's monopolists, it's aggressive liberal capitalists. An interesting group emerges as an example of great black leadership post the struggle, post 1994. The Royal Bafokeng Nation. This is from Wikipedia. The Royal Bafokeng is the ethnic homeland of the Bafokeng people, a Setswana-speaking traditional community. The monarchy covers 1,000 square kilometers in the northwest province of South Africa. Again, I have to emphasize the monarchy. This is not democracy. When people ask, what has democracy done for Africa? We need our kings back. The capital is Bokeng, near Rustenburg. Bafokeng is used to refer to both the tribal grouping as well as the land its members inhabit. So it's the Bafokeng people living on Bafokeng land. The kingdom's current ruler is Kgosi. Kgosi is king. Leruo Molutlehi, who has reigned since 2000. The Bafokeng first settled in the Rustenburg Valley in 1450 AD. The presence of the ceramics in the area suggests the arrival of the Bafokeng in the Rustenburg-Bokeng Valley at about this time. Kgosi Tsukudu became the first king of a unified Bafokeng in 1750. Bit of background. The Bafokeng tribe, Bafokeng meaning people of the dew or the people of the grass, own a piece of land in South Africa's bushveld on which 150,000 people, not all ethnic Bafokeng, live. Oral tradition suggests that when they settled in Rustenburg Valley, it captured heavy overnight dew, holding the promise that the land would be fertile and hence that the community would prosper. The Bafokeng struggled to buy the land, repelling invaders and imperialists as they did so. These Bafokeng people live in an area 150 kilometers northwest of Johannesburg, South Africa, with the balance scattered primarily throughout South Africa. The Bafokeng have retained their unique cultural identity and traditional leadership structure and are led by a hereditary Kgosi, king, who is currently Leruo Molutlehi. I want to zone into the economy. The royal house administers over 1,000 square kilometers of land. The nation has established a sovereign wealth fund, something that people have called for in South Africa, something that people have suggested for the Zulu kingdom. The sovereign wealth fund is known as Royal Bafokeng Holdings, an investment entity in Johannesburg. The fund is responsible for overseeing the growth and maintenance of the community's income streams. It is considered to be Africa's most progressive community investment model, with total assets under management at approximately $4 billion. The RBN has invested royalties and dividends in a number of projects and in civic administration and social services. I need to read this again. It is considered to be Africa's most progressive community investment model. Not some Afrikaner community model, not some white community model somewhere, not some Indian community model, not some Jewish, black Bafokeng people, Setswana-speaking people, run Royal Bafokeng Holdings, a sovereign wealth fund which is considered Africa's most progressive community investment model. The royalties and dividends have been invested in a number of projects. These include Royal Bafokeng Sports, which is in charge of sports development among the residents of the area. A 45,000-seat stadium and athletic complex was built in Bafokeng in 2000. The Royal Bafokeng Sports Palace was an official venue for the 2010 FIFA World Cup. I believe 6 of the matches were played there. Royal Bafokeng Administration, RBA, which is principally a town planning unit charged with service delivery and monitoring the progress of the master plan across all the regions. It looks after the various wards, khotla, within the nation to ensure that infrastructure and services are in line with the long-term vision. Service delivery, building of infrastructure for the benefits of the people. Royal Bafokeng Institute, RBI, whose goal is to improve education and learning in the Royal Bafokeng Nation. RBN has also recruited several manufacturing companies to Bafokeng as part of a drive to expand the nation's exports beyond raw materials and natural resources. Before his enthronement, Kgosi Leruo Molutlehi set in motion the next phase in the development of his people. His brother, Kgosi Mulwane Libone Buikanyo Molutlehi paved the way for the initiative by proclaiming Vision 2020. This challenges the Bafokeng people to reduce their dependency on their diminishing mineral assets and to become a self-sufficient community within the first 20 years of this century, whilst also maintaining the Bafokeng culture. This becomes interesting when you study the United Arab Emirates. United Arab Emirates, the Emirates, the Emiratis, United Arab Kingdoms. I think it's 7 kingdoms in the Middle East where they are run by kings, sheikhs. A lot of their wealth, even in places like Saudi Arabia, have been built of oil. And part of the vision of the kings there, again, monarch, this is not democracy. A part of the vision of the kings or the sheikhs there has been, we can't rely on oil forever. We need to diversify. And for people that do not know, the oil-rich nations in the Middle East are the biggest investors in solar energy and other renewable energy projects in the world, looking forward to a life beyond. So Kgosi Leruo, Kgosi Mulwane would also have a vision to say, look, we've got mineral resources here, of which the bulk is platinum, but we need life beyond that where we can diversify our economy while preserving our culture. The main areas of emphasis of Vision 2024 fall into the following areas: investment diversification, economic development, education planning, infrastructure development / master plan, health and social planning, and a crime-free environment. I'll add this because I think it may be important for the people of the Bafokeng. Most Setswana tribes, like other South African tribes, select certain animals to symbolize the nation. The crocodile is the genealogical totem of the Basotho Batswana people, Kwena, who include the Bafokeng. So if you hear someone whose name or surname is Kwena or the surname is Mukwena, those are the people of the crocodile. Thus, the crocodile is an element in the RBN's flag. In the flag, the crocodile is moving towards water, which the Bafokeng people believe to be a sign of contentment. The crocodile is depicted by the other Basotho Batswana groups with its mouth open, whereas the Bafokeng have always depicted their crocodile with its mouth shut. Very, very important. The Royal Bafokeng have a praise idiom, which is written in Setswana. They have a motto, Aiwele metsing, let there be peace. And then they've got an idiom, which is translated means the rhino, Nape the rhino with a sharp horn that pierces as it pierces for itself. So they also acknowledge the rhino as one of their totems. When you go to the Royal Bafokeng Holdings as a sovereign wealth fund, as an investment vehicle for the 150,000 Bafokeng people, one of the things you'll find is a breakdown of their investment portfolio. Sorry, I just want to read something. This is from the website. Our strategy is to diversify our portfolio to ensure that it is not reliant on one sector. This also becomes important for South Africa generally. South Africa as a modern economy was built off mineral resources, where I think at the peak, it was responsible for 60% of South Africa's GDP. This has dropped significantly. If I was to guess, I just haven't read latest reports, either 8 or 15% of our GDP is under our minerals. The rest have become financial services, agriculture, tourism, some manufacturing, etc., retail, etc., etc. So diversifying an economy from the primary is very, very important. It's almost like your family saying, our father used to be a police officer. But we can't rely just on that. We need to take our father's salary. We need to learn other skills. We need to maybe buy minibus taxis. We maybe need to open a spaza shop. We need to maybe buy some cattle and own a farm to diversify so that we're not reliant on this one thing where if our dad loses his salary or his job, we're in trouble. If the mineral resources are depleted, if it becomes expensive to mine them, or if the world shifts and mineral resources are no longer valued, what else can we balance on? So diversity becomes important in that regard as a country, as a continent, and then also specifically for the Bafokeng people. Our strategy is to diversify our portfolio to ensure that it is not reliant on one sector. We began the first stages of the diversification of our assets in 2005 and continue to do so. In 2006, the gross asset value of our portfolio was 22.4 billion rand. And through the improved quality of our portfolio, we have seen a significant increase over the last decade. Our 2024 net asset value of our portfolio was 56 billion rand. This is leadership. This is growth. Again, what's beautiful about them is that this money gets invested into community projects, sports, infrastructure like stadiums, schools, service delivery, clinics, their own cultural heritage and preservation. Very beautiful. Their portfolio is split up if you go to the website, royalbafokengholdings.com. Almost or just over half, about 54% is in financial services. About 4% is in pharmaceuticals. They have an investment in Discam. Almost 10% is in asset management. They've got a couple of companies that they've invested in there. About 5% of their portfolio is in property. Companies like GrowthPoint, ZenProp, they have stakes there. Just over 4% of their portfolio is in infrastructure. So they invest in infrastructure funds, Stanlib, ISQ, Northam, Sishen solar facility, Adams solar PV project. So they're investing even in renewable as part of their infrastructure investments. Almost 4% of their portfolio is in telecommunications. Yeboye to liquid intelligent technologies. About 2% of their portfolio sits in retail. Boxer stores, which was a spin-off from Pick n Pay, is one of their shareholdings. We Buy Cars, if you've heard of them. About 5% is in mining, oil, and gas services. That's how far they've diversified. Mining, oil, and gas services are only 5% of their portfolio. 6 or just over 6% of their portfolio is directly in mining with Northam Platinum. About 8% is in other investment sectors. JC Decau, huge marketing if you see some of the billboards. Cash, of course, and then other investments there as well. And like I said, over 50%, about 54% of their portfolio is in financial services. First Rand, Outsurance, Discovery, RMI Investment Managers, Royal Investment Managers, Ethos, mid-market. Diversified, looking to grow their portfolio to be very strong. I think this is absolutely brilliant. And as I said, you'll admire Afrikaners, you'll admire the Jews, you'll admire the Indian Muslims, but here is a black community run not by democracy, but by a visionary king, Kgosi Leruo, who set up a sovereign wealth fund, and they are saying this is where our money is growing. At some point, that 22 billion, they're now at over 50 billion in terms of the value of their sovereign wealth fund. Let me read this small part. This is from the Bafokeng Institute.org.za. So RPI is one of their focus areas. If you go to the website, RPN has a financial asset value of $4 billion US. This includes a majority shareholding in a platinum mining and refining company, Royal Bafokeng Platinum, and in on and offshore investments in the financial services, telecoms, property, infrastructure, and transport sectors. Through the income from the trust, the Royal Bafokeng administration implements development programs to improve the living conditions of the Bafokeng people. It employs around 400 people and invests in roads, utilities, schools, clinics, and other public amenities in the last decade. This is not relying on government. This is relying on your people and your leadership. Very interesting. Sadly, I want to mention this in the same conversation because we take from the example and the ideas to implement where else it can serve. I was born and raised Zulu, and it would only be a couple of years ago where I would decide to officially leave the Zulu nation and denounce my Zulu labeling, to say I'm no longer identifying as Zulu. I embrace my heritage. I'm fully proud and passionate about Zulu people. My family, including my immediate family, are all Zulu people, or they identify as Zulu people. I don't anymore, for various reasons. Ingonyama Trust. The Ingonyama Trust is a corporate entity that was established by the KwaZulu Legislative Assembly in April 1994, days before South Africa's first democratic elections. The establishment of the Ingonyama Trust resulted from a secret deal between the National Party and the Inkatha Freedom Party that convinced the IFP to set aside its planned boycott of the elections. These were going to be the first democratic elections. The Ingonyama Trust was founded as a repository for the communal land of the Zulu nation, with His Majesty the King as the sole trustee. In 1997, the Democratic National Parliament of the Republic of South Africa amended this act so that it is consistent with the modern constitutional order. So then acts was set up in place, but this was visionary leadership. Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi would ensure that the Zulu people had their land protected under some type of documentation and a trust, and the king, uZwelithini, would be the sole trustee of that land. The trust board is tasked with the responsibility of administering the trust and trust land for the benefit, material welfare, and social well-being of the Zulu nation, who continue to occupy the land as they historically have done. There are rumors of some 5 million people that live on this land. Just like the Bafokeng, they are the custodians of the land on behalf of the people. The trust owns about 30% of the land in KwaZulu-Natal, which is the equivalent of 28,000 square kilometers. Where the Royal Bafokeng own 1,000 square kilometers, the Zulu Kingdom rules over 28,000 square kilometers. The Board of Trust consists of His Majesty, the King Misuzulu Kazwelithini, who is the chairperson of the board, and the 6 members appointed by the Minister of Rural Development and Land Reform. So much land. Just going to quickly read through an article from groundup.org.za. Ingonyama Trust finances are not transparent, says report. The UCT Land Research Center says the trust is not compliant. This is in April 2024, which is last year, written by Liesel Human. The Ingonyama Trust, which has the Zulu King as its sole trustee and owns vast amounts of land in KwaZulu-Natal, is not being transparent about its finances. This is the finding of UCT's Land and Accountability Research Center, which says the trust is not compliant with the Public Finance Management Act, the PFMA. Over 5 million people live on the land and are meant to be the beneficiaries of the trust, but the disbursement of funds is vaguely reported, with no mention made of how distributions, if any, are put to use, the report says. If you ever go to the website of the Ingonyama Trust, you will find out that there are reports that they release every single year. Over 100 pages, over 150 pages that you can read through. Look at some of the financials, look at some of the notes, and decide for yourself how transparent or not it is. The trust holds about 2.8 million hectares of communal land. That's the 28,000 square kilometers. And it was established in 1994 under the Ingonyama Trust Act with the reigning Zulu King as the sole trustee. Failure to comply with the PFMA means that the trust finances are not properly transparent, nor is it accountable to its primary stakeholders, which are the 5 million people that live on the land, but more importantly, the broader Zulu nation, which some argue is at over 18 million people. The beneficiaries of the trust are meant to be the tribes and communities living on the Ingonyama land. I remember at some point, Kgalema Motlanthe of the ANC, a caretaker president at some point between Thabo Mbeki and Jacob Zuma, would speak about the dismantling of the trust and saying the people under that land must get their land under private ownership. Many would say, no, but why are you guys meddling? The people are happy. They have not been protesting. They have not been crying. But the issues were that some of those people are paying rent. And why? Because it's their land. Some of the people don't have access to land. Some of that land is making a lot of money, of which that money disappears and people don't know where it goes. That's one of the articles. Another article I'd like to read. Ingonyama Trust ordered to explain rental income. This is from 2019, 14 October 2019, written by Jan de Lange, news24.com. Zulu King at the time, may he rest in peace, Goodwill Zwelithini's Ingonyama Trust, which owns 1/3 of KwaZulu-Natal's inhabitable land, collected 118 million rand in rental income from inhabitants over the past financial year. That's just under 120 million rand. In a report attached to the annual report, the Auditor General expressed concerns about the reliability of the Trust's financial statements, adding that its control board had not reported fully on assets worth 24.4 billion rand. 118 million rand in income in 2019, 24.4 billion rand in assets, which were not properly accounted for. Expenditure of 320 million rand on municipal taxes had also not been reflected, while irregular expenditure of 1.9 million rand was left unexplained in the financial statements. At the time, the chairperson of the trust, who is no longer the chairperson anymore, Judge Jerome Gwenya, said it was under no obligation to report on anything over and above the approximately 20 million rand it received from government for admin costs every year. He argued that the trust was managed according to the regulations in the Ingonyama Trust Act. Very interesting. These would cause problems, by the way. I remember the board would be scrapped at that time, and then later on that board would be scrapped. There's a relatively new board now. Yeah, I think that's the last thing I'd read. When you go online, you find out in the last couple of years that Ingonyama Trust would make 50 million rand in a year, would make 20 million rand in another year, They'd be running at a loss because their operating expenses are too high. The salaries are high. And there isn't clear transparency. 24 billion rand in assets compared to $4 billion in assets of Royal Bafokeng Holdings. 28 million hectares of land compared to 1 million hectares of land. Arguably, yes, platinum on Bafokeng land, extremely valuable. South Africa and Zimbabwe almost have a monopoly on platinum if they were to find a way to galvanize it and use it for the benefit of the people, like has been done in the Middle East with oil. Where is the Ingonyama Trust getting it wrong? Who is benefiting from Ingonyama Trust? Maybe outside of the royal family. Are there certain people there, whether black people, Zulu people, white people, Indians, foreigners, making money from this land? Are the people of the land benefiting? Where are the projects? The roads being built, the schools being built, the stadiums, tertiary institutions, banks. Where is the cultural preservation institution of the Zulu people? The Zulus are arguably the most famous black cultural grouping on earth, thanks to the story of Ushaka Zulu and how big the nation is. But they are not organized. We praise Kgosi Leruo Molutlehi. It's difficult to praise the king of the Zulus. Similar kings can be mentioned in the Xhosa-speaking groups, whatever the different groupings are. And questions to be asked: how much land do they preside over? How much money is being made there? The Zulu royal family has a budget from the Department of KwaZulu-Natal of about 80 million rand just for their living costs. 80 million rand, while Zulu people remain poor. While Zulu people have to migrate to cities like Durban, cities like Johannesburg to look for jobs with limited skills. We need to learn. We need to do better. But my main thing behind this video was to give a shout out to the Bafokeng people. As we reference the Afrikaners and the Broederbond, as we reference the Jewish people and their business acumen, as we reference the Muslims and their retail prowess, and maybe you can add the Chinese as well. I think let's learn from the Bafokeng. Let's find interviews and speeches and the writings around Kgosi Leruo and other leadership at the Bafokeng to say, teach us, show us how we can set up our own sovereign wealth funds. 150,000 people is not a lot of people. You can organize your own family, set up a trust, put your land under that trust, see if there are any mineral commodities, see if there are opportunities for tourism, if there's some cultural or family preservation. If you guys can have an investment portfolio as a family, nothing stops you as a family investing in financial services, in retail, investing in banks, investing in agriculture and doing farming, investing in renewable energies, maybe having an IPP. As time goes by, it's going to be interesting to do case studies around the Mutsipe family. Patrice Mutsipe, of course, as the patriarch, but his sisters. Dr. Tsepo, who went to marry the current president, Cyril Ramaphosa. Bridget Mutsipe, who would go and marry at some point a minister in the presidency, Jeff Radebe. And how the family has managed to also become extremely wealthy. In the areas of Macau, where there would be Macau mining under Bridget, there'd be African rainbow minerals under Patrice with Harmony, where they would go and diversify. Patrice Mutsipe now with African rainbow minerals and African Rainbow Capital, and I think African Rainbow Energy, has now got investments in banks like Time Bank, has got investments in independent power producers, has got investments in sports teams like the rugby, the Blue Bulls, football, Sundowns, and many other spaces. What can we learn from these black success stories that we can implement in our families, that we can implement in our communities, in our cultural groups, and say we can do it too? We had the Vendor Building Society, VBS, as a bank, a black bank. We had African Bank, Dr. Sam Mutswenyane, Dr. Richard Maponya, may they both rest in peace, a black bank. We had Itala. We have Itala, a Zulu black bank. How do we use these as examples to say, black people, you can? The University of Ongoya, the University of Zululand, the University of Fort Hare, where people like Nelson Mandela and other great leaders would study. Turf Loop, University of Venda. There are brilliant black stories that we can learn from, that we need to speak about, that we need to celebrate, and that we need to sit around and extract all the learnings. Where did it go right? Where did it go wrong? How can we organize ourselves so that we can win? Paying you all the black pen.